Hello, Blenders, and welcome to episode number 289 of Real Blend, a podcast that learned a very valuable lesson today. Stop preparing.
Oh, God.
My name is Sean O'Connell. What? Sometimes preparation's good, Gabe?
I was going to say, sometimes you learn the wrong lesson, maybe.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm Sean O'Connell. I'm the managing editor at Cinema Blend and I'm the co-host of the Real Blend podcast. And on this week's show, we have a really fun game that we're going to do to round out the year. It's called This or That. I'll have Gabe explain that in a little bit. Poor Things by Yorgos Lanthimos is starting the very beginning of its theatrical run. It's going to make its way out to you guys momentarily. But as a result of that film coming out, we have Emma Stone, Academy Award winner Emma Stone, and I believe soon to be two-time Academy Award winner Emma Stone. We shall see. That's a tough category, Best Actress this year. And she's joined by her Poor Things director, Yorgos Lanthimos. The two of them are going to be our guests on this week's show. This is a big one, folks. We're really, really excited to have these two on talking about Poor Things, which I think is going to show pretty well in our top 10 lists. By we and our and all this jazz, I mean Kevin McCarthy of Fox 5 in Washington, D.C. Kev, we had a good one. We had a good one this week, didn't we?
Yeah, Sean, it's in Gabriel as well, and it's pretty surreal. My favorite thing to do is when I explain to somebody what our podcast is, and I explain like how we started it and where we've gotten to in terms of the interviews that we've had on this show, and having Emma Stone and Yorgos on is just incredible. Especially when you see this movie, you'll understand why it meant a lot to us to get them on, because it's really is a filmmaker's film, and it really works on such a great level in terms of narrative and storytelling. So we're excited to have them on. Well,
and also pop your favorite adult beverage, even though it's Friday morning, because we started as an awards podcast, and now we're booking folks like Joaquin Phoenix and Emma Stone, and obviously having Yorgos on. They talk a lot about The Favorite, as you will see. They talk a lot about their collaboration, and they talk about Poor Things. So we normally have Jake Hamilton in the chair. Instead, we have the very handsome and equally charismatic Gabe Kovach sitting in. Hey, Gabe, what's going on?
Equally charismatic. That's a tough bar. Just as handsome, I'll take, though. Yes, happy to be here. I will let the folks at home know I'm temporarily in Jake's seat. I'm just keeping it warm. He's in the middle of a junket as we speak, and he will be joining us later for that fun game that we're doing at the end of the show. So you'll have to bear with me for a little bit.
And I do want to mention, some people were posting underneath the bonus episode that we put up this week with director Sam Esmail, who has a film coming to Netflix called Leave the World Behind. Kevin's going to review that in a hot minute. People were posting, thank you so much for the bonus episodes. We understand how busy it is at the end of the year. You guys have no idea. The end of the year is such a slam on the schedule in terms of us trying to fit in junkets, especially after the strike, and a lot of talent coming back around, and all these studios who are kind of pushing for their awards contenders and trying to get them in front of press before the holidays happen. And it just feels like a very busy season has become even busier right now, as we're fielding a ton of interview opportunities and invites that are coming in. But I hope it leads to really exciting content for the show. We have a couple of things in the hopper that might come through, so keep your fingers crossed. If you're watching us on YouTube, thank you very much for joining us. Head down, give a like and a subscribe. For audio listeners, if you want to jump over and see the visual aspect of the show, especially this week when we have Yorgos and Emma Stone joining us, go to youtube.com/RealBlendPodcast. Gabe, aren't we coming up on like 16,000 followers? We're coming close to that. If not.
YouTube? Yeah. We're very close to that.
Unbelievable.
I wonder. I don't think we'll pass it by the time this airs, but we're getting close.
Okay.
This might do it.
And if you want to
listening,
please
call your friends.
Come on, let's go. Sign up for Real Blend Premium as well, too. It gives you an ad-free version of the show, and it gives you a newsletter from me every other Friday. Not this week. I'll be back into your inboxes next week. So check the description for information on where to sign up. Quick plug, as I mentioned, we have that bonus episode on all of our channels with Sam Esmail talking about Mr. Robot and having Barack and Michelle Obama as producers on your show, and some of the importance of physical media for a movie that was made for Netflix, and a really interesting conversation about some of the conversations they had about that. So go check out our conversation with Sam Esmail on behalf of that.
I will say, to plug it even further, he's one of those guests that fits right in. And I know we say that about a lot, but his energy, how much fun he was having, you could tell that like we got to that point where you guys were just kind of geeking out about certain things, and even just stuff that he was doing or what he was influenced by. And I think the interview part of him just kind of fell away. And I think at the end, he even complimented the both of you of like, this was a lot of fun. And that's I think that's always what we're going for.
Yeah, he had come to DC to talk about the film Leave the World Behind, which is streaming on Netflix as you're now listening to this episode. And we'll review it later in the show. But him and I ended up really bonding in my green room at my station about filmmaking. We just talked about shots and composition and things like that. And I think it was him or someone around him said, like, you guys should be on a podcast or something like that. And then Real Blend got brought up, and Sam was nice enough to then carve out some time in his day this past weekend when we were in New York to talk with us. He actually came in earlier than his press day started to do that interview. So thanks to Netflix and Sam for doing that. And really Sam is extremely talented. And if you haven't seen Mr. Robot, just want to plug back, 'cause it's a great show that he obviously was incredibly well involved in. It's an amazing show. So definitely check that out. Oh, it's fantastic. Rami Malek is amazing. Yeah.
One of those shows that just like flew underneath the radar for me. It never landed on my radar.
So. Incredible.
It's really
incredible.
Yeah. Is it? Cool. Yeah. I don't really even know what it's about. So that's fun to go into a show like that. Sometimes being completely cold. So, case in point, there's a movie coming out called Poor Things, and Michelle, I have the screener copy of it. Michelle keeps saying, like, when can we watch this? And she keeps asking me questions about it. And I just sort of deflect. Like, I don't want to tell her anything about it going in. She refers to it as the movie where Emma Stone doesn't wear makeup. And I was like, it's so much more than that.
But in a way, that's such a funny way to sort of encapsulate what it really is about. There's a piece of it that they're like, yeah, that's a...
Should we set that up? I mean, like, for people like who don't know what it is, should we just explain the film real quick before we talk?
Let's get to the interview and we'll review the film on the other side. When people
okay. So we are very excited to have both Emma Stone and Yorgos Lanthimos joining us on behalf of Poor Things, their follow-up to The Favorite. And we're really excited for you guys to hear this conversation. Here is Emma Stone and Yorgos Lanthimos.
One thing I find interesting, Yorgos, is your use of lens choices. And I was interested from a narrative perspective as a filmmaker, when you're in a sequence, how you decide the narrative use of a lens from a technical perspective.
That geeky. Okay.
That's pretty geeky.
Yeah.
We try.
I think what we do, like, we don't design everything beforehand, like how we're going to film the scenes. What we do with, Robbie Ryan, I've made the last 2 films together that you know of, and we've already shot another film with Emma and Robbie. And what we try to do is, like, just before we start, like, build some kind of a language and a toolkit and say we're going to use these tools. We test a lot and we look at things and see, how it fits into the world that we're building. And then we have these tools, and when the time comes, we just, on the day we rehearse with the actors and then start thinking of what the best way would be to film the particular scene. And I think there's like a learning curve. So maybe in the beginning we shoot more stuff to have more options when we don't really know exactly what we're doing. Mm-hmm. Not that we ever do, but it becomes a little bit more familiar, and the language becomes a little bit more specific, and then we have some shorthand about like how we're covering something, or when we use this kind of lens or the other kind of lens. So this time around, because we were building, it's the first time that we actually make a film inside a studio, and all the sets are built inside. Even exterior locations are built in a studio for most of the film. So that meant a lot of lighting as well. And
for the first time ever.
For the first time ever, because all the films that we've done before, and I've done before, have been on location, just with natural light or practical lights. So this was like a huge departure for both Robbie and myself. But what we did was try and keep the same kind of ethos. So we decided that we're going to pre-light everything, pre-light the sets, and especially when we're inside a room, we would light only from outside and then use practicals inside. So in a sense, we just retained the same kind of conditions as we were, when we were filming on location with available light. And that's because we're going to just create an intimate atmosphere on set and just have, the camera there, the AD, the focus puller, the actors, and the boom operator sometimes. Even so, this film particularly, all the more intimate scenes, the sex scenes, and all that. Most of the times we didn't have a boom operator, and we would rig the mics, and it was the least amount of people possible. So we just we kind of recreated the same kind of atmosphere, although this was like a completely different scale of film. And then you would go outside and see these hundreds of people, around, and lights and trucks and, construction going on and everything. But then you would close the door and it was just like 4 people like filming, like there's no one else around in the world. I don't know if that spoke to the lenses and all that, but it's just like the
Well, but building off that though, Emma, I want to ask you about this because we've talked to a lot of different actors who have said like they prepared a ton and then they get to the set the day of, and based on the way that the set is, they have to almost throw out everything that they prepared because they didn't anticipate, the way the set may be designed so that the camera can move through or anything. And one of my favorite scenes in this movie is Bella when she first just decides to wander around Lisbon, because I feel like I'm taking it all in with her for the very first time as well. So did you have that sense when you were going around the sets? And was there one in particular that when you got to it, you were just like, oh, everything I prepared doesn't matter. I just have to throw it out.
You never prepare.
I don't prepare.
For the reason that you says, why should I prepare if I'm going to throw everything away? So he just waits.
Why prepare? Just figure it out on the day.
He rests.
I rest. I like to lay down a lot. No, it's the preparation for something like this was truly like we worked on some physicality, Yorgos and I together, and the stages. I learned my lines, and that's kind of it. The stages, Bella's development, like stages 1 through 5. Oh my God, they understand what I'm talking about.
What stage? You didn't tell the people what stage.
Fine. 1 through 5, we made it stages 1 through 5 in Bella's development. And so we kind of, if we had to jump around, it was mostly in chronological order, but at the very beginning at Baxter's house, we had to shoot stage 1, the very beginning, and stage 5, the very end of the film. So without having shot kind of her development in the middle. So that the actual practical physicality of that, we worked on a bit, but that would still change on the day. And then beyond that, I mean, we've worked together for long enough to know that like once we're in the environment, we'll find things, we'll talk about it, or not talk about it, but just kind of figure it out as we go. But in the same way that he doesn't storyboard, you do kind of need to be in the environment and not have something, but I've never really been an actor that's like, I have this exact idea in my mind and this is what I'm going to do.
I beg of you, when you're on stage holding that Oscar, please just pull a Joe Pesci and just say, I didn't prepare anything, and just walk off. That would be the greatest speech. Emma, you did mention you guys working together before. I would imagine, I keep hearing a lot over this press tour the word trust, and I would imagine this is the kind of film that only works if you've got that trust between the actor and the director. Could you have made a movie like this if you were working with a director for the first time?
I don't think. I mean, maybe if it was you. I guess maybe if we hadn't made the favorite movies, made this one. Yeah, I guess yes. Other than that, no, I can't really. I don't know. I wouldn't have wanted to. I mean, the combination, I think, of those factors. Like, I love Bella so deeply and this story so deeply, but then also, him and his work and Yorgos and his work. And so I think that all of those elements coming together were what made me want to do this so badly.
This is a question for both of you. Yorgos, correct me if I'm wrong, but like with The Favorite and obviously The Killing of the Sacred Deer and obviously The Lobster and films prior to that, you generally don't use new composition, new music. It's generally music that already exists in the world, like Beethoven and things like that. The score here is so extraordinary, and a voice almost, in my opinion, it's almost like Bella's voice in a way. The score just kind of speaks to us almost like a character, aligned with the cinematography as well. So for Yorgos, for your part of the question, why this film did you decide that you wanted to actually have a composer and insert music that what didn't exist? And for Emma, I'm always fascinated to know on the other side of production, when you see your performance set to a score, emotionally what that's like for you to then finally see it all come together? And does it open up at all things about the character you didn't know by hearing it set to that? I'll start with you, Emma, and then go to you, Yorgos.
I mean, not to sort of start stealing your answer, but Jerskin actually wrote most of this music before we even started filming. So I'd heard a large portion of what this score was going to be before we started filming. And, the dance in Lisbon, he had written that song and we'd been rehearsing with that song for a long time. And he's actually in that scene playing an instrument that was completely made up with this.
Oh, that's cool.
I was talking about earlier. Sorry. Anyway, so I think, even beyond score, everything coming together and seeing it is always kind of startling or reveals things, the editing in general, performance wise, all of it is a different interpretation of the character than you know what is going on within your own body. I mean, it's like hearing your voice back on a voicemail, and you're like, that's what I sound like. That's what it kind of feels like. It's like one thing when you're acting within yourself, but then you watch it and you're like, that's what I looked like when I was doing this. I sound like that, whatever. So you try to have like enough distance from it to not have that sort of attachment to what you think it's supposed to be. And I guess that goes back to what you're saying about what we were talking about with preparation. Like if you don't have this sort of, otherwise I should just be directing if I need it to be such a particular way, and that's why it's amazing to work with him, because I trust that what ultimately it's all going to become is what you've seen. Do you want to talk about
Yeah. I'm just curious about the decision to use a composer.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's not that I wasn't trying before. I did try, but it never really worked out, because the way I do it is I want to use the music while I'm editing. And I'm researching a lot while I'm editing a film, and I, find the music and then I try it. And it's such a fine balance, the tone that is created by using music in a scene, that, when I find something that works, then it's kind of impossible for me to like replace it with something similar or something different. So, the attempt of, using temp music and then having a composer write music and substitute, that never really worked for me. Not that the music that the composers wrote was bad or anything. It was just not that exact, it didn't achieve that exact tone that I managed to get while, combining all the elements. So when we're preparing the favorite, and I'm always, looking for, I listen to a lot of music as well, and I'm always reading about it and looking for composers, and I came across Jerskin's album. I read about it, and then I listened to his album, and I was, completely.
We're preparing Poor Things, not favorite.
Poor Things. Sorry, when preparing Poor Things. Did I say the favorite? Yeah. Preparing Poor Things. So I listened to his album, which is, his first album. It's an incredible. But it's like a pop album, but it's so diverse and so rich and so original and unique, and it has incredible sound. And so something very instinctive told me that, could this be the guy? Like it feels like there's something in this that makes me feel like, this could work. And then, as Emma said, like I approached him, but the way we did it was like, well, he'd never written, music for film before.
Right.
So I said, like, listen, do you want to try it? And, why don't you just try and write music?
He was like 25 years old or 24 or something.
Wow. That's incredible.
He just turned 28.
What? Yeah. That's insane.
That's great.
What am I doing with my life?
Oh my God. Seriously. That's incredible.
Yeah.
So I asked him to just, try stuff out, and I gave him some general direction, and he came up with stuff that were immediately incredible.
Yeah.
And, a lot of it is in the film. And then based on what he sent me, like we had another chat and I would, imagine what we might need. And I was going like, oh, why don't you do one which is much more romantic and something which is faster? I might need something faster in some moments. And he was just composing music based on just having read the script and looking at some of the, research, the visual research and design of the world. And he was just coming up with that stuff. And, we would like hone in on what the sound would be. So he would do more stuff in the beginning and then we would, pare it down to what it should be about this film. And then by the time we started filming, I basically had all the music composed and recorded, before we even shot a frame of the film. And so I worked with it the same way I worked with music before, which is like I had all this library of music by Jerskin though this time. And, I started using it during the edit and I would cut it and, kind of sometimes change the structure or whatever. And then he would, make it better because, our cuts were quite rough. But basically, like 90% of the music that is in the film is the music that he composed, before he even saw anything or we shot anything. And that's how it worked. And actually, that's how we're doing, because he's working with us on the next film that we shot that we're now editing. And we did it the same way. And the music that he wrote on this film is completely different to Poor Things. But we followed the same process. Like I send him the screenplay. Sometimes I send him, he also doesn't watch rushes or anything like that, like dailies. I would just send him pictures to get the atmosphere of set. Sometimes it's also misleading pictures because for the film we just did, I just sent him black and white pictures, the whole time.
Sent him black and white that whole time?
Yeah. So so he gets a sense of what's going on, and then that gets him going, and he composes. And again, we had the music before we started editing. So it's the only way I found how to work with a composer without them having to, like replace music that I kind of used while editing. It has worked so far for us.
Guys,
That's
after we finished the press day yesterday, the three of us got together and started working out our questions. And one thing that Jake told me, which blew me away, was that because to me, even though it's such a unique vision, there's confidence in every decision that's made. There's confidence in every performance. And so when I heard that Mark Ruffalo like almost begged to get out of the performance, or that Emma, that you had such fear on day one, like it doesn't come through.
You told me that
all.
you cried on day one.
You cried on for day one?
I cried.
Every day.
Well, Yorgos, I wanted to kind of ask, like, how do you help your actors with doubt like that? And Emma, when did that confidence finally kick in for you?
Well, I don't remember. Like Mark says, I said, like, when he told me, like, oh, I don't think I can do this. Maybe you should get someone else. I went like, you are the one, which doesn't sound like me, but that's how.
Like you, he always says that.
Yeah, he doesn't. He does a really bad impression. So don't do the impressions, but you can do the part.
This is a man who always has the impression.
No, like everybody has doubts, and Mark was, he'd never done anything like it, and of course he was hesitating, but I could see that he really appreciated the material, and he. Deep down, he really wanted to do it. He was just scared, and that's like the best reason to do something, and to expect that it, something interesting might come out of it if you're scared. So I just encouraged him. I said probably.
It's a great impersonation. And Emma, that fear was there for you the whole time?
I think I don't know that fear is the right word. It's more just like kind of like vulnerability or wanting to live up to it, like caring so deeply about this character and this film that I want to do it justice, and and so I guess that's fear, but it's kind of not. It's like it's more just being hard on myself.
Gotcha. I can understand.
Yeah, more like self-critical.
Not when he's resting, though.
Not when I'm resting. When I'm resting, I'm
no judgment.
No judgment.
We're being told we're out of time, but we really appreciate you guys taking the time to come on the show because we know how valuable your time is. And all three of us love this movie so much. And we can't wait for more people to see it. So
I
thank
watched
you
the
so
screener
much.
3 times.
Oh my God.
No, Jake, you've gone to the theater.
Oh, yeah, that's exactly right. I've gone to the theater and paid 3 times.
Never saw it in the theater.
Oh no! The first time I saw it was in the theater. Don't worry. The first time I saw it was in the theater. But there's a thing that happens where my girlfriend also came with me to the screening, who is obsessed with this film. And every time someone comes over, she goes, "Jake, put on Poor Things for them." So that's the new welcome to our home is we put on Poor Things and go sit down. You've got to watch it. We know you came over to see the dogs, but we're gonna put on Poor Things for you.
Obviously, we want to thank our friends at Poor Things for helping to get Emma and Yorgos on the show. We want to really quick give a spoiler-free reaction and review to this movie, which we all anticipate we're going to be talking about over the course of the awards season. It's really funny to hear people who are discussing this film and talking about as being Yorgos Lanthimos' most accessible film. And I guess that says to me a lot more about his other films and how unusual they are. If you know his films, The Lobster, The Favorite, there's another one that I'm missing. The Killing of Sacred Deer and then Dogtooth, of course, if you go all the way back to those. They are unusual films from a very strong directorial voice. Clearly, you're watching one of Yorgos's films when you watch it. I have been saying on record, over the course of this show that his films don't always work for me necessarily. A lot of times these guys will have films like The Favorite or even I think going back to The Lobster and have them in their top 10. And it's never really connected with me. It's always been a little bit too strange. I ran into that when I watched Saltburn recently, where it was just, I understand what the filmmaker's going for. It just doesn't work for me. But Poor Things worked so incredibly well. It's my absolute favorite Yorgos Lanthimos film, which for me, I know isn't saying much, but I really, really loved what he was trying to do here. So much of it is because I think Emma Stone is so fantastic as Bella Baxter, this character that she's playing. It's a tough performance that she has to give. We were talking about the fact that in a side chat that it's a really warm film, despite it being extremely different and strange. And everybody who we talked to from the craft perspective standpoint of the film talked about knowing that it's really weird and it might turn a lot of people off. And there's a bunch of things that they hit you with in the opening 10 to 15 minutes that are meant to keep you back on your heels and kind of jarring. Like, okay, it's period, but it's Kevin mentioned it's a bit of a Frankenstein movie. And you're trying to figure out a lot of what is going on before it gets revealed, what the hook of it is. To me, the performances are what anchor it. The screenplay, obviously, too, but the way that these actors, Mark Ruffalo, Willem Dafoe, and obviously Emma Stone, the way that they tackle these characters, I loved it. This is clearly going to make my top 10. I'm just trying to figure out where it lands. Gabe, you were trying to inject some stuff. I'm sorry. I just kept rambling.
No, you're good. I wanted to add, because I agree with you with all of that. And I think what I've been telling friends, like the way I've been selling it, because I also love this movie. And it's one of those movies that every day that's passed, I still think about it and I just find myself loving it even more. And I can't wait to rewatch it.
Yeah.
But as far as like the Yorgos aspect, to me, Yorgos has always had like a very surreal, fantastical world that he's telling his stories in. But the surreal, fantastical nature is all internal. And you're just kind of like, why are these characters acting this way? And, oh, this thing exists. But
totally.
This is him going, this is like Yorgos Lanthimos via Wes Anderson, where he's just externalizing the surrealism. And I mean that in the best way, whether you like Wes Anderson or not. It's and not in the style of Wes Anderson. I just mean in the way that Wes Anderson puts his world in front of you, and you're living in this, like, you have to take a second to be like, okay, this is the real world, but it's definitely not, and it's surreal, and it's fantastical, and it's interesting, and it allows for these characters to be so different, but feel like they really exist.
You nailed it. Because I think what bothers me about his previous characters, yes, The Favorite is a period film, but like, let's say The Lobster as an example, like it's set in contemporary time or feels like it's supposed to be contemporary or modern time. So when characters act the way that they do, it always like, what world are we in?
Right,
that this is passable kind of thing. But then Poor Things builds these incredibly elaborate, sets to drop Bella and the other characters into. that I think that's helped me. You know, it sort of broke down that barrier between what normally separates Yorgos' storytelling from me. And Kev, is this a top 10 movie for you? And I hate to make you commit to the bit, you know, for your list, but did you like it that much?
Oh, definitely top 10. This is my favorite movie Yorgos has made. I think it's the best film he's made. And as you heard in the interview, there's a lot of fascinating things about the production of this movie that were fascinating, especially in the interview that you just heard, that they built, these sets were built. This was very different from how they shot The Favorite and The Killing of Sacred Deer and The Lobster and films like that. The sci-fi aspect of it is fascinating. And I'll say this, like, imagine if Get Out and The Lobster had a baby. That's kind of how I'm going to put this. And I want to say Get Out specifically only from the science fiction perspective. And then The Lobster, similarly kind of in that realm. But I do want to say I'm not putting the movie in a box and saying it's those two. That's just the vibe it gave me in terms of some of the sci-fi aspects of it. What I love about this movie is it's such a sweet story, just told in a very unique way. It's like Frankenstein is a really interesting terminology for it. And I think Yorgos, I think Frankenstein was part of like the selling point in terms of like getting the actors involved, or you should watch this material type of thing, because it clearly revolves around that. Defoe is that character. It's an experiment. But what's beautiful about the movie, as I said in the introduction, is the sense of wonderment that Bella has. I loved spending time with this character. We forget, we live in a world, we're so jaded as a society. When you first bite into like a cookie for the first time, or a piece of pizza for the first time, there's just moments of wonderment and excitement that you get that just become diluted as you live. I will just leave it at this. I think Emma is brilliant in the film. I think it's one of Ruffalo's best performances. I think it's one of Defoe's best performances. Rami Youssef, I want to shout out to him as well. I think I'm pronouncing his full name right, but this is one of his first, if not his first major,
his first movie,
feature film.
Yeah.
And I got to tell you, this guy holds his own against these giants. You're talking about three of the greatest actors of our time, and he is just crushing it.
And when you say Willem Dafoe's best movie, like, that's a mouthful.
One of his.
And it's true. Yeah, no.
Yeah.
I know. But even saying that is like incredible when you look at his career. But I agree with you. I think he's phenomenal in it.
I'm waiting for someone to mash up like the beginning of this movie with The Lighthouse and some sort of like, look where the character is now. Like there's some bit to be played there.
Two more quick points I want to make real quick. There's a really interesting juxtaposition in this film about science and feelings, and the way the hard facts of life and the feelings that interweave themselves into creating who we are as human beings. And I think that's what the film is juggling with, right? This science experiment, essentially. And then at the same time, you have the feelings of a human being, and how do you capture that? How do you keep that at bay? That to me is a really interesting theme, and the theme of curiosity. But the cinematography is outstanding. You are in this world, and I loved the way Yorgos explained the way they shot this, and the way this is like his first major score too. They really hired a composer really for the first time in one of his major movies. He's used existing music throughout before. Yeah. I think it's except for his first movie. Yeah, it is.
It's amazing. A great score. All right. So like I said, we're going to be talking about this film a lot as we roll through the award season. Look out for it as it makes its way to your market, because it's really terrific. And we can't recommend it enough. Obviously, if we're all saying it's going to make our top 10s, I think Jake feels the same way. We're going to roll him into the show in a little bit. Quickly, before we move on, though, with Sam Esmail being on the show, Kevin, I want you to talk about Leave the World Behind. This has an amazing cast. I fear it's one of these Netflix films that's just getting buried somewhat. I know some people were commenting underneath his interview like, oh, I wish I had the chance to see this in theaters. And it's sad that there are a lot of these streaming films that do traditionally go to streaming, and we don't get a Ridley Scott or a David Fincher push, where it goes to the theaters, because this feels like something I would want to see in a movie theater.
No, it did have a theatrical.
Oh, it did.
Okay. It's actually been in theaters for a couple of weeks. So it's been playing in like I'm going to call it the killer release, where they just throw it into these random small theaters throughout the country, which is great. I saw the killer in theaters. I'm happy that I did. But when Netflix puts a movie out in theaters, unless it's Knives Out 2, you have to go to like a kind of not the small. The Alamos are big movie theaters, but they're not the AMCs and the Regals, so they're kind of harder to find. I'm going to give my friend Chris Van Vliet credit for this because he said this could be the next Bird Box for Netflix because it's a great point because that movie was a phenomenon. It was a huge film for Netflix. I think this is going to be the same thing as Chris was pointed out to me. He's
interesting.
Like, there's thematics in this film that are going to mess with people, and there's going to be a lot of conversations around it. For people who aren't familiar with the story, basically Julia Roberts and Ethan Hawke's characters bring their kids to a luxurious beach house, essentially. And when they're at this house, which they've rented, a cyber attack essentially happens. We don't know who it's coming from, but internet's down, TV's down. That's why it's kind of a love letter to physical media. All the things that you physically still have in your life work, like vinyl or things like that. And so
that's cool.
What ends up happening is in the middle of the night, Mahershala Ali's character and his daughter, they knock on the door and kind of like knock at the cabin, kind of felt like in a weird way. But Mahershala Ali actually owns this house that Julia Roberts and Ethan Hawke are staying in. And he's like, listen, there's a lot going on out in the world right now. Can we please stay in our own house for the night? And that's a strange, interaction, right? Because it's Mahershala's house, but Julia Roberts and Ethan Hawke are renting it. But Mahershala has nowhere to go because the world is in danger. So it's a really interesting concept. It's shot immaculately. It's incredibly well made, and it's made by a filmmaker who obviously loves movies, right? And Sam, if you listen to our interview, you can get that. There's a lot of Children of Men stuff in this film, and Sam geeks out about that a lot. There's a lot of shots in this film that were reminiscent of what Chivo and Koran did on Children of Men. Julia Roberts is exceptional. This is like such a different role for her. I'm a hip hop nerd, so I love. I've really been getting into a lot recently Joey Badass, and there's a really great Joey Badass song that starts the film in the credits. It just sets the tone for the whole film. I was. Go listen to our bonus episode because we got to round this out and move on. But there's some shot compositions in here. If you're a nerd about movie making and you love filmmaking and you want to learn what's going on in a filmmaker's mind, why they choose to put an actor or a character in a certain part of the frame or leave this much headspace. Same with Poor Things. Dive into that stuff. I mean, it really does enhance the way you watch movies if you start to learn about where these filmmakers are coming from in terms of narrative composition. So I thought it was outstanding. It's ambiguous. It's scary. It makes you think about technology, what we're doing with technology. There's a Tesla sequence that terrified me. Every time I see a Tesla now, I think about that scene. So you think about the power of movies and what they do to you in your real life when you leave. And this is one of those thinkers. And it's very ambiguous. I really, really enjoyed it. And I highly recommend it. And if you watch it on Netflix, great. If you can get to a theater, even better.
Good. Very good. Well, that's a great recommendation. I'm going to check that movie out myself. So I'm glad that Sam joined our show. So let's take a really quick break and we'll see you guys on the other side as we round this show out. And we are back. Okay, so we were hoping to have Jake join us, but I think he's working out how to do a Tango and Cash sequel with Kurt Russell. Clearly more important than joining our show, which is totally fine. I get it. Jake's going to bring his Monarch interviews, I'm sure, to the Jake's Takes channel, so make sure you guys look out for that. Instead, in order to save the game that we were going to do with him, we'll do that on another episode. But there are a couple of movies that have been coming out right now, and I've been talking about how busy we've been trying to cram in as much stuff by the end of the year. And the boys last week got to talk about David Fincher's The Killer. I received a few emails from our listeners who shamed me into not having seen Fincher's latest movie. And you're correct. I honestly, and that was the point of the newsletter that I wrote, which is we have these filmmakers at the moment they put something out, we should be watching them on day one. And there were two projects that I just felt like I was behind on. One was The Fall of the House of Usher, which obviously we love Mike Flanagan. And the minute he put something out, I should instantly start watching it. And the other one was The Killer. And I want to let everybody know that The Killer was incredible.
Have you finished Usher? This is a tangent.
No,
You talk about
okay. I'm on episode 5. And it's again, it's just finding time. It's just
it's busy.
Finding time. And I don't want to rush it. I want to enjoy that as much as I could. And that was the thing about The Killer, was like, I wanted to make sure that when I sat down, I wasn't distracted by anything. I wasn't doing it, for 30 minutes and then leaving and coming back, because David Fincher, he creates a mood and an atmosphere, and that's as much the experience as everything else. I'm going to break the real blend tie, because I know that like Gabe and Jake liked it, but weren't blown away by it. Kevin, I know that you loved it. I'm in the loved it camp. Well, I guess I'm creating
make a tie.
I guess I'm creating a tie.
Yeah.
I thought that movie was hysterical. And so much of it is, so I was listening to our good friend Josh Horowitz and his podcast. He had Michael Fassbender on, and Fassbender talked about how he recorded the narration track. Where he laid back like really comfortably, and they hung the cue cards over him, like up above him, and that like mood,
image.
Yes, just like I guess I felt that and saw it every time that Fassbender did the narration. It's so great. And the repetition, I'm not going to repeat whatever the mantra is that the Fassbender's character keeps saying to sort of center himself of like, be prepared, God, I can't even think what it is. Stick to the plan. He says,
anticipate, don't improvise. Or don't
so
improvise,
much of that
anticipate.
felt like what Fincher would say to himself as a filmmaker,
Sure.
Like I thought about all those different lines, and I was thinking of David Fincher saying that to himself to get him through all of his projects. I will agree with the guys when they say that it doesn't reinvent the wheel. Like we have seen this story done before, but I legitimately felt the attention and the composition and the talent in every shot. Like I can't tell you how many just throwaway shots that I saw where I was like, oh my God, that's beautiful. Like, oh my God, that's incredible. Kevin talks about filming, on film, and Fincher notoriously does digital. I think Fincher does digital better than anybody else. There are scenes in New York City when you get to where it's leading up to the confrontation with Tilda Swinton's character, which is miraculous. And it just looks incredible. So much of it looks incredible. The fight in Florida is one of the most entertaining things I've seen in a long time in terms of, I love how they've staged it. Like, it's just incredible fight.
I want to ask our listeners something. For anybody out there who's seen the film, or if you watch it and you can pick up on this, I'm just interested in knowing whether or not this was sound design or score. When you're in that fight in Florida that Sean is talking about, there's like a hand-to-hand combat fight in an apartment complex, and it's like a dark room, and it's super, super brutal. And there's this disturbing beating sound that's happening throughout that scene, and I would love to know whether or not that's Reznor and Ross or that's sound design, because there's so much going on in the edit of this movie, and it's so nuanced and subtle, but every little detail is perfectly designed. You know what I'm talking about, Grabe? I
wouldn't be surprised if it's both, because if I remember, and I've only seen it happens really fast. There's a lot going on. I'd have to sit down and watch it again. But I remember I think the impacts are scored. Like the impacts are super bassy. Like when they punch each other, it's it's got hits to it versus just your Indiana Jones classic.
But there was something it was almost like a whoosh, there was
probably a mixture of both. But
amazing.
And the way
that's why the movie's so great though, because when that stuff becomes almost the part of the world, it's an atmospheric nature of the movie. It's so well done.
Something as simple as the way when he's listening to the Smiths and it cuts back and forth between what's in the headphones or what's in the car, and then the door closes and then you hear it muted, or it's in his ears, and it's Fincher just playing around with that is him just having a good time, and you still marveling the fact that you even think to do that is so fantastic, and I love you so much for that.
Almost take him for granted. Maybe this film almost feels like it's come and gone. And you have this masterclass filmmaker with a movie that's sitting on Netflix right now. And I don't know how it would have done theatrically. It might not have done well. I have no idea. But, Fincher is one of those filmmakers that it should be celebrated when a new movie comes out from him. Yeah. And I really hope that people spend the time just to watch it, because there's so much work that went into this movie. And
you absolutely should see it.
The behind the scenes on this, just look up the visual effects, just look up anything about this film and the filmmaking and how they're making this movie. It's so interesting, and it's so simple, but it's not. It comes across simple and very seamless and easy, but we all know the work that goes into that stuff. It's wild.
And I almost feel like in 5 to 10 years, this is going to rank alongside something like The Game, just because it's not Zodiac and it's not Fight Club, right? Where when someone mentions The Game and you're a Fincher fan, you're like, oh, that's great. I love that movie.
Love The Game.
Kind of thing. Yeah. But it doesn't get listed amongst his, because he has The Social Network on his filmography. Yeah. It's really easy to just be like, all right, well, it's not so-and-so. but like he still delivers these classic genre films that I think are just
it
so
has
good.
it has me excited for his. I'm always excited for his next thing, but this feels, to your point, like the kind of project that we don't put on that level, but he has so many like high concept ideas of, like you're saying, like messing with whether we're in or out of his perspective with the music, the way that the fight is sort of scored / designed, and things like there's so much that happens that feels very high concept that I wonder what he's going to be like, oh, I tried it on The Killer and now I'm going to do it in this, like what are the things that he took from this that were risks, or, he was like, I don't know if it's going to work, but this is a fun project to try it on. And it's, I'm not worried about it being something else.
I don't know if it's 2023 or just the industry and how, I don't know if you guys feel the same way, but it feels like, and again, this is a topic for another time, but just content overload in general, in terms of films and the way how many movies are coming out, how many are coming out on each day. And for a film like The Killer to kind of get lost in the shuffle, it just worries me a little bit, because just in terms of the industry in general, like, are we putting out too much? Is there too much coming out? Are we losing sight of great work because it's falling into streaming and Hulu and Amazon and Disney Plus and shows and movies? And I just feel like we're overloading ourselves, and we're almost not hurting the artists, but we're not giving the artists the appreciation and the time they deserve to have a film come out and sit with audiences for a period of time. And it just makes me sad. Like, I feel like The Killer is not being talked about anywhere.
Well, and I'll give you this, though.
It's outstanding.
It's about the audience going out of their way to find it, because I've reached the point now at this year where a lot of people who are non-movie folk, are coming up to me and saying like, oh, what's your favorite movie of the year? What's the best movie that you've seen this year? And when I tell them it's Oppenheimer or Across the Spider-Verse, they're kind of like, oh yeah, I need to see that still, like these movies that are huge with us. Yeah. And it's really about the audience picking and choosing what they're going to go see. And there's even major things that people just aren't going out of their way to go see. And that's just the reality of it. So
I think we have too much. It's the Cheesecake I feel like movies have become the Cheesecake Factory menu. You open it up and there's just too much. I don't know what to get.
Well, I wonder if it's going to start slowing down, in the post-strike and productions, sort of being pushed back to that level. But to the point where, like, the other title that I wanted to discuss, because a lot of people have been bringing it up, and I finally got a chance to catch up with it over the weekend, was Godzilla Minus One. And that's a movie that I knew nothing about. It's a movie that I didn't even know was coming. It's not like it's getting, the same kind of push that one of the MonsterVerse films is getting from Warner Brothers. There's a lot of talk lately about what the budget has been for it. And that's kind of put it on people's radars. People are going to the theaters to go check it out, especially if they like a Godzilla film. I will say this, the one thing that people are saying about it is how strong the human characters are in it. The human characters are incredible in this. For people who don't know what the movie is about, I'm just going to give you this basic level, because I thought this was a tremendous way into it. The main character it's set during 1945. It's the end of World War II. Japan is still kind of reeling. And there's a kamikaze pilot who was on a mission that would have encountered Godzilla. And he decided to fake something wrong with his airplane. And he returns back to this island base. The mechanics sort of go over it. They realize that he kind of lied about something being wrong with this. He just was afraid. He just didn't want to complete the kamikaze mission. And in Japanese culture, he's branded a coward. And it's like, how is he going to live with that moving forward? That is such a compelling drama that without even introducing Godzilla into it, it's exciting. And you want to see what happens with this guy going forward. And believe me, that's just the surface of what this man is going through. That then on top of it, when he confronts Godzilla and has a chance to maybe fire his weapon at him and doesn't, it's like this extra guilt that's just put down on this man as a burden. And then you get to all the Godzilla scenes that obviously are bringing people to it. It's funny. There's a lot of talk about the budget. I think some of the Godzilla scenes in this movie look really fantastic, especially stuff that's set in the water. There's a lot of Jaws references to it, and there's Godzilla against boats or like tracking boats and stuff. But then there's a lot of time with Godzilla's on the mainland, and it looks very much like man in a rubber suit. And now I'm hearing from people who are like, oh, the filmmakers intentionally wanted to do that. Maybe. But when you have, Godzilla King of the Monsters giving me lifelike recreations of Godzilla fighting against massive creatures, I'm leaning a little bit more towards that because some of this stuff looked a little stiff and a little bit fake. And it's rare in a Godzilla movie where I'm like, get back to the humans. But that stuff was so much more compelling to me than what was going on with the monster stuff. I liked it a lot. I didn't love it, but I'd give it 4 out of 5. I thought it was, worth seeing on the big screen for sure.
Why is it called Godzilla Minus One?
Don't know. Can't tell you. I wish
they don't
I
explain
knew.
it in the movie.
No, not that if there's a reason for it, I did not pick up on it, but there's nothing that I picked up on that led me to understand why it was called Godzilla Minus One.
It's a specific title though. It's
because
specific.
Godzilla was invited to a wedding and then there was a falling out and they took away his +1.
No, but honestly, Sean, you saw the film. There's no indication as to why it's called that.
Nothing that hit me where I was like, oh, that's the reason for this. No, nothing.
It's so weird.
I know.
All right. Well, if anybody listening, let me know about the killer sound design.
Yes.
Let us know about why it's called Godzilla Minus One.
Please.
And I'm still waiting for answers about the Amazon scene in The Killer. So send all that into us, please.
I will say, having watched it, I understand your trepidation behind it.
Right.
But that movie is loaded with brands, like
McDonald's.
right from the get-go with McDonald's and FedEx and part of me. Well, WeWork is huge. Yes, that was really super suspenseful. With the people were outside the WeWork and they were about to deliver some stuff, and he's
right.
And I was like, wow, this is intense. Yes, Gabe.
Intense.
This is from Reddit user I don't know how to say their name.
I was
So
like,
Reddit
they're
user
listening to our feed
on r/Godzilla. It says Godzilla's attack happens after the atomic attacks on Japan during World War II, which set them back to 0, meaning Japan had to rebuild. When Godzilla attacks, they start with less than nothing, so not 1 but -0. So it's the idea that they were the nuclear attacks, and then they considered that 0, and then they were attacked again by Godzilla, and it was
-1.
According to this, and I did see it a couple times, like on Google. I believe that
sounds right, but I'm telling you, if that's described in the movie, then it went completely over my head.
Well, isn't that? I mean, I'm not as well versed in the Godzilla mythos,
mythology.
and it's been a long time since I've like studied Godzilla. But that's the whole sort of the metaphor of Godzilla came from, was post World War II and the idea of
very much
of Japan being attacked and
the nuclear attack. It's almost like this was a good double feature with Oppenheimer. In that the bombs that were dropped on Japan in the Godzilla mythology.
I wanted to bring this up.
Led to the creation of
I know
Godzilla.
we have to close, but I think Kevin would find this funny. I don't know, Kevin, if you've seen the Fallout TV series trailer.
No.
Or know what that is. But I think it's really it's a game, but it is directed and produced, I think showrunner, however you would say it, by Jonathan Nolan, and it is about the world going through nuclear fallout and then hundreds of years later picking up with the apocalypse. And there's a shot of like 6 in the trailer of like 6 nuclear blasts going off, and I go, how funny is it that Christopher Nolan drops Oppenheimer this year, and then Jonathan Nolan has a trait, like they were both directing nuclear blasts at the same time.
Yeah.
I thought that was such a weird coincidence.
And the Jonathan, we don't talk about Jonathan Nolan a lot, and he needs to be talked about more.
I think it's because he's been in TV for so long. Because he was doing Westworld. Right?
Yeah.
I think that's just because he was on TV.
But he's very important to Chris's storytelling, Chris Nolan's storytelling. Like if for people who don't know, Memento was based on, I believe, a story that Jonathan Nolan wrote that then he gave to Christopher Nolan, and Christopher Nolan wrote a screenplay. And like Memento was really that jumpstart. Following was a big movie for Christopher Nolan, but I do feel like we don't talk about Jonathan Nolan a lot, and I think I always find it interesting, and it's fascinating because I think Jonathan Nolan has
maybe we'll get him on the show.
Accent. He has an American accent.
Do you know who else feels that Jonathan Nolan doesn't get talked about enough?
Who?
Jonathan Nolan.
Jonathan Nolan.
He would be a fun guest. The Fallout series looks really good. He would be a fun guest.
It would be fun to have.
I would love to talk to him. I would be just fascinated to know just his relationship, because Christopher Nolan used to live between, I think it was London and Chicago. I think that's how his parents, so that's why Jonathan has an American accent. It's a really fascinating story. I'm reading a book called The Nolan Variations right now, which I highly recommend to people. It's just a guy, I think his name is Tom Stone, I think is the author, but he sat with Nolan for years, and kind of like Hitchcock, Truffaut. Yeah. Right. And just sat with Nolan for years and just kind of interviewed him from the beginning of his life. Or beginning of his career. It's really fascinating if you guys are interested.
Jonathan on, I'm going to make him shout Dunkirk. So just to keep the streak alive. All right.
Yeah.
Let me know in the comments down below, in addition to the questions that Kevin is asking to have answered, I want to know, in light of Leave the World Behind, a Netflix movie that went right to the streaming service, unlike this, which did have a theatrical release, that you wish you got to see in theaters, whether it be a Red Notice or a Six Underground or something like that. What is a Netflix movie that went right to the streaming service that you wish got a chance to see in the theaters? In the meantime,
I would even remove the went right to. I think there are plenty of them that they released theatrically, but it's super limited. Even.
Yeah,
It's just,
like Red Notice had like 2 weeks in like 2 theaters or whatever it would be. Like the theatrical windows for Netflix movies need to be like Apple's doing it right. And that's why, and we all love Netflix, obviously, and all this, and Apple, but like Netflix needs to look at what Apple's doing, like with Killers of the Flower Moon and Napoleon, where you make a film. Like I remember hearing that Napoleon, I could be wrong, was made specifically for Apple. And then Sony just became the distributor.
yes.
And so that's kind of hopefully the world we enter in. But Netflix obviously is such a big deal that I don't know that they're going to share with other studios. But hopefully we come to an agreement and we can get these theatrical. But they want it on the streaming service. That makes sense. But
we shall see. All right. Well, speaking of Netflix and big directors, we might have a few others in line before we reach the end of the year. And of course, our top 10s. So keep it right here with Real Blend so that we drop new episodes every Friday with fun interviews and good conversation like this. Follow us on social media. In the meantime, he's not with us, but he's at Jake's Takes. We've got Kevin McCarthy TV, who is leaving Congress at the end of the year. I am at Sean_O'Connell. He's at Gabe Kovach, and the show is at Real Blend. Yes,
and
Gabe.
the show is on Threads now.
Yes.
So if you use Threads, go follow us on Threads. We have no idea what the social media landscape will look like in the coming months. So we're on Threads now.
Is it at Real Blend?
I'll just leave it at that.
Threads? Is it at Real Blend?
Yeah. Same handle. I got all the handles.
I love it. All right. We'll talk to you guys next week. Threads.
The man who moved the earth.